we know that 100,000 fresh graduates comes out of higher learning institutions every year. As an employer, as a trainer, you're providing lots of workshops in terms of entrepreneurship, whatever. So what kind of certain lacked skills you're observing from these fresh graduates and how they can fill that gap?
The sort of skills that we would love to see more of are, number one, a willingness to question and challenge authority and suggest new solutions. And secondly, this is tied to it, problem-solving skills. So we don't care so much about someone who has on their resume the exact experience in the job that we're hiring. What we care more about is raw talent, energy, and someone who, if you give them a problem, they are entrepreneurial enough to find a solution.
There's a lack of jobs and a huge unemployment rate. There's going to be rejection after rejection for so many, and so I feel deep down there needs to be a resilience to be able to not take no for an answer and keep going and to keep getting back up, I would say. So a confidence in that as well, that when someone's knocked back, they don't just stay down. And with all of that, just an entrepreneurial mindset to say, well, if maybe a door doesn't open or there's no door, I'll create one so I can walk through it, is probably what I would say.
All the graduates are not in the same level, but what kind of solution that we can do right now? We know companies like Dereja who are working to fill such kind of gap, so we can mention that issues. And from your skill, what kind of solution should be placed here to fill such kind of gap?
You mentioned Dereja is doing a great job with the career centers, with this expo itself. Like I said, EDC, I know a lot of other institutions have centers and universities to provide them the students those skills to build their capacity. But I don't think it's just the students. It's also the responsibility of the lecturers, of the university itself, of the Ministry of Education, of employers to build up their capacity. I think it has to come from both the supply side and the demand side. It can't just be from one or the other. So I think we all have a role to play in this area. It's a matter of honing their skills, refining their skills, making them realistic, building up to the potential that we know that they have. And that's done through all the different initiatives that I mentioned.
I was wondering who is going to be the actor who's going to develop their career, because most of the students don't know what they want to do. Some just want to get a job and then later realize that they should have a career. And how is that going to happen?
What I would always advise is that from the employee's perspective, they focus less on the industry, when it comes to looking for a job, and they look more for an employer that has a culture that they think they would be excited by and engaged by and where they would learn. That will give them challenges, right? Because whether they stay with that employer for their whole career or just for a few years, at least that will help them learn and figure out for themselves, what functions within industry do they enjoy the most. To help that happen, as an employer, I think it's important to have a system and a culture where you are giving, big challenges to new employees. You're not, making them do tactical tasks for years and years, because that's just going to drive them out and they're not going to reach their potential. So having mentorship programs within your company, making sure you're giving very interesting work and projects to new employees to test them out and challenge them. I think that the combination of those two things can help people figure out what is the right career path for them while learning and building their skill set.
Whenever we're thinking about producing the kind of human capital that we're looking for to shoulder the country's future development, we need to work from the grassroots. We have only one institution like Dereja. We need to see more institutions who can provide internship programs, trainings, and also other entrepreneurship trainings to be provided for them. So who is responsible and how can we institutionalize these kind of institutions like Dereja in the future?
Once again, I think it's a combination of different stakeholders. You've mentioned institutions like Dereja. Maybe they should be more. Yeah, it would be wonderful if they could be more. But the universities also play a huge role in this. If each and every single university took the commitment to actually have robust career centers where they sit and they discuss about careers, You know, you're graduating. What does that mean to you? Where are you going? What can you do in your actual field of studies? Now, if you bring a lot of the graduates and you actually sit down and you ask, what are you going to do with your education? It's a very challenging conversation. And this conversation can already be started early on in the universities, together with career counselors who can help them think, who can help them plan, who can help them identify what are the companies that are out there, how do you search for the companies, how do you really do your research to see what also fits. And Ethan, I really like what you said, you know, it's also environments that can provide them the broad perspective, because even after they graduate, do they really know what career they're going to enter into? Did we all? They don't have to figure it all out then, but at least they have a base and they have an education and they have an idea as to the direction that they want to go. And once they enter into the workforce, then they can start to explore different opportunities. And from the employer side, what can actually help foster this is to have that open enabling culture and environment where if you bring in those fresh graduates, you can move them around different functions and they can explore and they can actually experience those areas.
I think it starts from the home. Like Dina said, when they're young, before they get into university. We have to be able to foster this sort of environment where, you know, go for what you want. Are you good at drawing? Okay, maybe you can be an architect. You don't necessarily have to fit into one of those 3 buckets that I mentioned. And I think culturally that's kind of the push, is to, you know, fit into one of those careers. So I think if that kind of environment is cultivated in the home, when they get to university, they already have an idea about what they want to do, and then when they graduate, it's an easy next step because they already have an idea. Okay, I want to be an architect. They can already start researching what are the architecture firms that I could work in, you know. So I think that would make the transition easier. So I think part of the problem is just that we're forcing kids to do something that they may not be passionate about or good at. And we all know if you're not passionate about something, you know, you're not going to excel as much as you could if you were passionate about it.
Do you have a community outreach program whereas when we go to the regions, the regional states, to what extent are we reaching your programs to those people who don't have internet access?
We do different types of trainings. Like I mentioned, we have a rural training program as well that reaches even rural farmers. We target mainly micro and small enterprises. So we have a low literacy training as well. People that, you know, obviously can't read and write properly, we provide them with the training program. So we have a huge effort reaching those rural communities, just because we know the majority of Ethiopians live in the rural areas and they don't have internet access or whatnot. But one thing that we are now working on is a mobile training development for using entrepreneurship in a mobile platform. Any sort of mobile phone. We all know that everyone now has a mobile phone, even when you go into the regional areas. So we're developing a quick kind of tutorial on entrepreneurship, basic bookkeeping, how to keep your books on an online platform. And that we anticipate will reach millions of people in rural areas.
Let's talk about finally about the job fair. So there are lots of fresh graduates coming here. It is one of a platform that employer and employer are meeting each other. So this is one of the exposure for the majority of fresh graduates to know and exactly give the right self-image about themselves, what kind of comments they are receiving from the companies who are stationed here at the job fair.
A job fair like this, you won't necessarily conduct interviews and make hiring decisions right now. But what you can do is you can meet candidates, learn about them, and also educate them about your company. In our case, Moss ICT and Ember, we're a technology company, but we have a variety of roles that span, you know, not just IT, but also customer service and sales. And so identifying candidates based on their passions, the sorts of functions that they enjoy, the things they like doing, we can walk out of the Expo with hopefully a good list of candidates that we'd like to meet again and to go through our hiring process.
But do you think that it is easy to identify somebody's talent within a short period of time, whether he has that kind of the required amount of soft skills he's fulfilling there? What do you suggest?
It depends on what you're looking for. For example, what Ethan just mentioned, they're looking for that, how you interact with the customer. So I think those sort of things you can pick up right away. It's how they approach you, how they introduce themselves to you. What they say in the introduction can tell you something about somebody, how they dress even. Is their hair combed? You know, it's these little things that you can pick up, because when they're facing that customer, it's in that instance they have to make that connection. So if that person can make that connection with Moss Ember right away, he's a potential, or she's a potential for the next stage, is I think what is being referred to.
that we have a big number of graduates, but most of them need to get a job. They need to secure a job as soon as they graduated. They don't want to go to entrepreneur path. That's because the awareness, the culture we've developed so far is whether once you are graduated from higher learning institutions, you need to get a job. The government or whatever the institution, they should give them the job. But how can we change the culture?
For me personally, I wanted to be an entrepreneur when I heard the stories of successful entrepreneurs where I grew up, and so I think we shouldn't take away from the fact that having role models is a key thing. And in Ethiopia, I think a lot of people, when they excel, the way that people look at them is, oh, they did something to get there, or there tends to be sometimes a cynicism towards how that person succeeded, and I think that needs to be turned on its head, and we need to celebrate people who, whatever industry they're in, against the odds have done it. And so by hearing their stories, whether they never left the country or not, whether they studied abroad and came back, or they took on their family business and quadrupled its profits, whatever they've done, let's take a positive lens and look at them through a positive lens and celebrate them and say, what can we learn from these individuals? There's always going to be something negative you can pull out of someone's story, and so it's just about changing the perspective of how we see that. So I think that there just needs to be a total change in how we view people who have succeeded and celebrate their success.
I was going to add one more thing that can really encourage entrepreneurship is it's a big risk when you start your own company. You have no income, you might have to hire people, and so in other countries, especially certain city clusters like Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, you have this ecosystem of venture capitalists, former successful entrepreneurs and companies who can serve as mentors or early investors. If Ethiopia can develop those kinds of clusters, and it takes time, I think that can also encourage entrepreneurship, because then you'll have that support network that someone needs to take that risk.
Do you think it would give you enough time to bring a solution?
I think more than the solution, at least the way I see it, it's really in the commitment. For me, what I would like to see, or what I would like to get out of this, is the commitment from all the different stakeholders, the actors, education institutes, from the government side, from organizations like yours, from entrepreneurship development, employers, is really that commitment to help develop the youth. Because if we at least are able to develop the youth and help them to be capable enough or employable enough, or have the ability to start their own business, that's already a huge step. So how committed are we? And what's the next step? I think this is an important question.
And I think one thing that we also need to work on is understanding what's going to be the demand when it comes to the labor force, the workforce in the coming years. And we have not been very good at doing that yet, but I think with the huge industrialization that we're going through, the industry parks that are being developed, all the big investors coming into Ethiopia, they're going to need a labor force, especially skilled and unskilled labor force, but that's coming up. And so I think the important thing that we need to start doing is understanding what that demand is going to be in the next 20, 30, 40 years, and preparing the university graduates, the students coming out of university, for those jobs specifically. Because if we can't provide them ourselves, they'll bring them somewhere, and it'll most likely be from outside, which is not what we want, because we have over 100 million people in this country, and they're very skilled in all different sectors. So that needs to be cultivated. It's a huge opportunity for this country and for the coming workforce. So I think that study, that assessment needs to be done in order to be prepared for what's coming once we become a middle income country by 2025.